Hey, what's up? Kendrick Dish here from Kendrick Dish Creative and Shoot for Results. And I want to talk about some cameras that are coming out, some exciting developments in the world of photography and video. And I think what we're going to find out is that 2018, that's the year that the DSlr died. Mirrorless is here to stay. All the manufacturers are jumping on board. Sony's already on board. Nikon just announced their full frame mirrorless options. Canon is about to announce their full frame mirrorless options. Panasonic is interested in a full frame mirrorless. I heard, this is from the rumor sites, so you know, maybe it happens, maybe not. Zeiss is coming out with a full frame camera. That sounds kind of way out there. Fuji, yeah, I'll tell you what, Fuji, I've been having some problems with my Fuji X-T2, and it's making me rethink whether or not I'm going to stick with Fuji or not. Now, what I am committed to is I'm going to wait and see what happens the rest of this year and kind of see what happens with Sony, see what happens with Canon, see what happens with Nikon. Now, the problems I'm having with my Fuji is that sometimes it stops recording for no, well, I don't know why. It just stops recording. The camera doesn't shut off, but it just stops recording. Now, what I think that might be is because one of the batteries died inside the grip or inside the camera, and it doesn't automatically switch to the next battery. It's just not a very good system, and I wish Fuji would make the firmware update so that it could just, the camera just switches to the next battery instead of stopping recording. So I just updated to the firmware 4.2. I'm hoping that that resolves any further issues, but I'm afraid it won't. Now, because I sometimes use this camera for professional stuff, I really can't have it stopping in the middle of a recording. And so I'm really thinking about what camera's system is going to be for me. And I'm interested in the X-T3, which is supposedly being announced pretty soon. The XH1 is still pretty interesting to me, and I may look into that. So I'm not giving up on Fuji just quite yet, but I'm really open to what Canon is coming out with. I'm interested in Nikon, definitely interested in Sony. There's a good chance I'll pick up a Sony. The Sony A7III is looking pretty darn good, and I suspect, pretty sure the Sony A7III is right around the corner as well. So what this really means is that we have so many options now as photographers and as videographers. These cameras are coming out left and right, and what that's really doing is that's driving down the price and driving up the feature set. And these companies Canon is being really challenged to come out with this. They probably wouldn't do it if they weren't being challenged by Sony and they weren't being challenged by Panasonic. The Nikon cameras, they were just announced a few days ago, the Z6 and the Z7. Now these look, on paper, these are really good cameras. And Nikon, they make great cameras and they make great lenses. And I assume these cameras are going to be worthy of the reputation until I'm proven wrong. So it's Nikon's reputation that they stand to lose, not necessarily anything else. So for the professionals, I think the professional Nikon shooters are going to grab this camera and keep it as a second body or a third body, or maybe that's their video camera, because it works with all their lenses that they've already got. And so for a lot of Nikon users, this is going to be a really great situation. The specs on it are pretty good. I'm not a Nikon shooter, by the way. I've used them a few times, never really felt like that was the answer for me. But I think they're great. I have no real problem with them other than the ergonomics and the button layout just didn't jive with me. That's my only complaint. The image quality is great. Lenses are great. So I believe in Nikon. Now, I think this is what Nikon should have done a year or two ago. There will be more cameras with better specs down the road. This was kind of their entry. This is what they have to lay the groundwork. They have to get this thing into people's hands. They have to release these new lenses. I think the price is pretty good. Maybe the Z7 is priced a little high, but I think the $2,000 price point is pretty good for a really nice camera. Now, The single card slot situation that everybody's up in arms about with Nikon and presumably with the Canon option too, which we'll get to in a second. Yes, 2 card slots is better than 1 card slot, but not every professional shooter needs 2 card slots. Right now, I have 1 card. This is my X-T2 has 2 card slots. I have 1 card in there. This isn't a professional shooter or anything, but my point being is that you don't always need 2 card slots. Remember film? There was only 1 roll of film in there, and it was way more fragile than an SD card. Now, remember the first DSLRs? They all had 1 card slot. So we've gotten by with 1 card slot plenty of times. Professionals do it all the time. Yes, 2 card slots is better, but if you're a professional who relies, like wedding photographers probably need 2 card slots. That's true. Sports photographers, you know, a lot of times they're switching between 2 different lenses. They've got 2 different cameras and they're shooting this one, then they're shooting this one, then they're shooting this one. So even if they have a card go bad, they might still have good images from the other card. So even a sports photographer may not be in a situation where a single card slot is a deal breaker. Now they're more interested in things like the burst rate and the megapixels and things like that. So remember, cameras come in a whole package. What are you getting for the whole package? So basically, yes, 2 card slots is an important feature, but it's not the only feature. It is not the end-all be-all of every single thing about the camera. So a real professional is going to take a look at it and decide whether or not they like the positives to go along with the negatives, or whether the negatives are too negative to go along with the positives. So every person is going to decide this on their own. Every professional, every consumer, every amateur, it doesn't matter. You're going to make this decision based on what's right for you, and don't listen to all the critics who are going on and on about every single pro needs dual card slots. Now, the feature set on this Nikon is pretty strong, including the output of 10-bit 4K over HDMI on a full frame sensor. So that, I think, is pretty valuable. I think you're going to see some of these other manufacturers catching up to that real quick. But right now, Nikon's the first mirrorless style option that offers this, I think. There's some bigger cinema style cameras that do that, but I think this one is the first one to offer 10-bit 4K over HDMI. The EVF and the LCD both seem pretty good on paper, better than the Sonys actually. And I guess I want to talk a little bit about full frame. Now, full frame is great, but it's not a deal breaker for so many people, and including me. Now, I shoot real estate. I shoot real estate video. That's not the only thing I do, but that's one of the things I do. So having the wider field of view that a full frame offers is important to me to get those wide shots for real estate. But I'm getting by with the APS-c size sensor with a wide angle lens. So even though I might want a full frame, I'm getting by and fairly happy with the APS-c with a wide angle lens. So it's not a deal breaker for me. And I for my portraits and stuff, yeah, full frame would be nice. Get that more shallow depth of field. I definitely think full frame is nice, but I don't think it's the only feature to consider. Size is a feature. Weight is a feature. Lens size is a feature. So for portability and travel, the smaller lenses for the smaller sensor make a lot of sense. If you carry your camera around a lot, reducing the weight is something you may be interested in. So if you can still get really good quality with an APS-c sensor, or even a Micro Four Thirds sensor, then don't necessarily jump on the full frame hype. You may be better off with the smaller body and the smaller lenses that go with that. So just keep that in mind. I don't think I'm going to buy one of these Nikon cameras. The other options are good enough for me, so I probably won't drift into Nikon, but I am keeping my eye on it. It may be the one that wins out for me based on all the different compromises you have to make. Size, speed, price, features, stuff like that. So we'll see, but right now I'm going to say probably not Nikon, which takes me to Canon. The Canon EOS-R is not announced yet. I'm reading these rumors websites and looking at what's coming out. It's supposedly on September 5th, so in a couple days, they're going to announce the Canon EOS-R, and a new lens mount called the RF mount. Now this is what Canon should have been doing a few years ago. They should have been leading the pack with these full frame mirrorless options, but Sony did it, and Sony's been the one taking the prize. Here's the specs that are interesting so far. These are leaked specs, so take this with a grain of salt. It could be changing by the time you see this video. This is just based off of rumors right now, but it's pretty solid. It's 31 megapixels full frame sensor, dual pixel autofocus, and yes, a flippy outy screen articulating fully towards the people who are. It basically works as a good vlogging camera. That right there makes it such a good option for so many things. Like, I'm interested in it just specifically for YouTube videos. Right now, I've got my Fuji sitting here, and then up here, I've got the monitor to kind of frame the shot, check the lighting, check the focus, and stuff like that. So having the flip out screen right here would be so much better. But the rest of the video specs, they leave a little to be desired. There's no IBS, no in-body image stabilization. That's not a deal breaker. Some of the lenses are stabilized, but from a video perspective, having IBIS is definitely good. Now, here's the rumored specs so far, and it seems like they gimped it just like Canon is known to do. They don't want to cannibalize their more expensive cameras, so they limit what you can do with the cheaper cameras. So this one looks like it's probably going to have 4K at 30p, full HD at 60p, and 120p, but only at 720. Now, that sucks. That's not keeping up with the competition. What I really wanted a lot of people want 4K 60p. I really wanted full HD at 120p. I'm disappointed that this camera probably isn't going to have it. Maybe the next one, maybe the nicer one, maybe a couple generations later, I don't know. But Canon is kind of known for not really pushing the envelope as far as the video specs. Now, what's interesting about the rumored specs for this Canon EOS-R camera is it only has one card slot as well. So when it came down to it, both Nikon and Canon both decided that these cameras didn't need 2 card slots. So what that tells me is that these are not the professional cameras that they plan to release. I think the price points for these are going to come in at, Nikon's is about $2,000 for the Z6. I think Canon is going to come in at $2,500, maybe $3,000. Now, Canon is known for a little bit being overpriced in some of their cinema gear, I think. So I suspect they're going to come in a little higher than what they ought to. But they're going to come out with another camera, the higher end camera, the EOS-R1 or something like that, that's going to be a $5,000 version. And that one is going to have the video specs. That one will be replacing the 1DX Mark II. So they got to come out with something that will replace that and at the same price point. So be on the lookout for that kind of camera here in a year or two. I think that's what's going to happen. That one's going to be the one. This is kind of the entry. This is kind of the entry point. It's kind of like the digital equivalent, or the mirrorless equivalent of the 6D Mark II. You know what I'm saying? So one of the other things this rumored Canon EOS-R doesn't have is no log format. That again signals that it's probably not geared to be that professional version that they probably will come out with later. Now, this new RF mount is pretty exciting, and they've got one lens that really drew my attention, this 28 to 70 f2 lens. It's smaller than the 24 to 70 f2.8 in size, but it has the f2 aperture. That is really good, and I think that particular lens is going to draw a lot of people over to that Canon system. That's a lens that gets attention. That's a lens that people are going to want to have. That's for me, that's one of the workhorse ranges that I really like to use. So honestly, I'm really interested in that lens, and it may even draw me over there, even without these other video specs. We'll see, of course. We'll see see how that body performs. We'll see how these lenses perform in the reviews. I think I gotta wait a while before I actually dive in and make a new system change. I've had this Fuji system for a little over a year now, and besides the malfunctioning, I'm pretty happy with it. I like the size, I like the reduced weight on the lenses. So I like the mirrorless electronic viewfinder. That's pretty important to me. But I'm open. You know, when I came into this Fuji system, I told myself that I was coming over to Fuji away from Canon because Canon wasn't being innovative. Well, they're finally starting to recognize that the mirrorless trend is here to stay, and hopefully this new lens mount and these new lenses signal that they're fully invested in mirrorless, and in the DSLRs. They're over. They're done. I'll be surprised if after 365 days from today, I bet there won't be any more DSLRs announced, ever. It'll be the end of the DSLR. So this is September 2018, August 2018, whichever you want to say. This is when DSLRs died. Nikon, Canon, both jumped on board mirrorless, and I think they dove right in full. Like, they didn't just dip their toes in the water. They dove in, I think. We'll see, of course. But with Panasonic interested in full frame, with Sony coming out with full frame cameras left and right, with Zeiss coming out with the camera, what? I don't know. That seems like weird. But the Sony A7III is, I know several people that have switched. I see people switching all the time to the Sony A7III. The pictures look amazing off of it. The video features look pretty good. So that's an attractive camera. And I'm actually really interested in that camera for real estate stuff. Getting a full frame camera, getting a wide angle lens for it, and basically using that for the real estate, shooting an S-Log. I may end up going that direction soon. So we'll see. There's a lot to be determined, but it's just a really exciting time to be involved in cameras. So I hope you're excited as I am, and subscribe to this channel, like this video. We'll talk about all these cameras at more length, and including possibly switching out from Fuji, jumping into Canon, jumping into Nikon, jumping into Sony. We'll see what happens, but I'm excited, and I hope you are too. Catch you on the next one.